I signed the divorce papers without saying a single word. No arguments, no demands, no tears. He thought I walked away with nothing. But the moment I stepped out of that courtroom, his money stopped working. And days later, at his $350,000 wedding to his mistress, the music suddenly stopped because a man walked in, and in that moment, his entire life collapsed. The mediation room inside the Atlanta family court felt unnaturally cold, as if the air itself was trying to warn everyone inside that something irreversible was about to happen. The long mahogany table reflected the harsh ceiling lights, amplifying the tension that hung thick in the room. On one side sat a man dressed in an immaculate designer suit, leaning back with careless confidence. His name was Thayer, and the victorious smirk on his face made it clear that he believed this day marked his ultimate triumph. He tapped a gold fountain pen against the table, impatient, arrogant, and smug. Across from him sat Lysandra. She didn't fidget, she didn't cry. Her posture was composed, her hands folded neatly over her knees. She wore a simple but elegant tailored dress, expensive without being loud. Her calm unsettled everyone in the room far more than tears ever could. The mediator cleared his throat, sliding a thick stack of documents across the table toward Lysandra. The sound of paper scraping against polished wood echoed sharply, breaking the silence. Thayer scoffed. "Make sure you read every word," he said loudly, clearly intending for everyone present to hear. "Walking away from me is the biggest mistake of your life." Lysandra didn't respond. Encouraged by her silence, Thayer leaned forward, his voice dripping with superiority. He went on about how she would never survive on her own in a city like Atlanta. He mocked her years as a housewife, claiming she had lived comfortably only because of his hard work as CEO. According to him, she had no skills beyond spending money he earned. The insults poured out freely. Lysandra listened. Inside, she felt a strange sense of clarity. This man no longer resembled the one who had once politely asked her parents for permission to marry her. Power and money had hollowed him out, leaving behind nothing but entitlement and cruelty. Her lawyer attempted to intervene, but Lysandra raised a hand gently, stopping him. She wanted Thayer to keep talking. She wanted to remember this version of him forever. When Thayer finally ran out of words, he shoved the pen toward her with a smug grin. "Go on," he said. "Sign it. Prove you're brave enough to live without my money. Don't worry, I won't give you a single cent. You'll be back in less than a month, begging." Lysandra picked up the pen slowly. She scanned the document once more. No claims, no assets, no shares. A clean, unconditional divorce. To Thayer, this was total victory. To Lysandra, it was the final lock clicking into place. Her hand didn't shake as she signed her name. The scratch of ink across paper sounded final, like the closing of a chapter that should have ended long ago. Thayer snatched the papers immediately, laughing as he checked the signature. Relief washed over his face. He was free, free to enjoy his wealth, free to be with his mistress, free from the woman he believed had held him back. Lysandra stood. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't look back when Thayer shouted something sarcastic about her finding her own way home. Outside, sunlight flooded the courthouse steps. A black sedan waited at the curb. As Lysandra slid into the back seat, she finally allowed herself a small, controlled smile. She opened her tablet. A private bank logo filled the screen, and with one calm movement of her finger, everything Thayer believed he owned was about to disappear. While Thayer celebrated his freedom, Lysandra was about to make a single decision that would shut down his entire world without him even realizing it. The black sedan glided smoothly through Atlanta traffic, sealing Lysandra away from the courthouse and everything she had left behind inside it. The city buzzed outside the tinted windows, horns, pedestrians, ambition, but inside the car there was only silence. Her driver, a silver-haired man who had served her family faithfully for decades, glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "Did everything go as planned, ma'am?" Lysandra answered with a single nod. She opened her tablet again. The screen illuminated her calm face, reflecting lines of encrypted data and layered security prompts. A prestigious private bank logo shimmered briefly before the interface demanded multiple levels of authentication. Password, secondary code, biometric scan. The system recognized her instantly. Primary administrator, Lysandra Vandross. The financial dashboard unfolded like a living map, accounts branching into sub-accounts, corporate holdings connected to personal lines, assets interwoven with surgical precision. To anyone else, it might have looked overwhelming. To Lysandra, it was clarity. For 5 years, Thier had believed himself to be powerful. He had flaunted platinum cards, signed checks without hesitation, and spoken of his empire as though he had built it brick by brick. What he never questioned, what arrogance had blinded him to, was ownership. His access had always been secondary, a convenience, a courtesy, a privilege granted by marriage. Lysandra tapped on user permissions. There it was. Fear, managing director, delegated access. She felt nothing as she selected his profile. No anger, no bitterness, just precision. One by one, she disabled the permissions. Credit cards, blocked. Cash withdrawal, frozen. Corporate transfer token, revoked. Digital banking access, suspended. A warning message flashed across the screen. This action will immediately paralyze all financial activity for the selected user. Proceed. Lysandra pressed confirm. The screen paused for several seconds, a spinning icon marking the transition between illusion and reality. Then a green checkmark appeared. Access successfully revoked. She leaned back, closing her eyes briefly. At that exact moment, somewhere else in the city, Fear was laughing. He was stepping out of the courthouse with a lightness in his stride, already dialing the number that mattered most to him now. The name Vesper lit up his screen. "It's done," he announced proudly the moment she answered. "I'm officially free." Vesper squealed with excitement. He told her everything, how Lysandra hadn't demanded a single asset, how the company, the money, the future all belonged to him now. He boasted about how easily he had won. They agreed to meet immediately, to celebrate. Thier didn't notice anything wrong at first. His car was waiting, polished and expensive, exactly where it always was. The driver opened the door respectfully. Everything looked normal. That illusion lasted all of 20 minutes. At the most luxurious 5-star hotel in downtown Atlanta, Thier walked into the banquet manager's office with Vesper clinging to his arm. He didn't ask for prices. He demanded the most expensive wedding package available. Crystal chandeliers, imported flowers, elite catering. When the final figure appeared, $350,000, Thier didn't blink. He tossed his black card onto the marble desk with a confident smile. The terminal beeped. Declined. The manager frowned politely and tried again. Declined. A faint crease appeared on Thier's forehead. He laughed awkwardly, muttering something about system errors. He pulled out another card. Then another. Every attempt failed. Vesper's smile began to falter. Finally, desperate to save face, Thier grabbed the company checkbook and scribbled out a check for the full amount. The manager accepted it cautiously, promising to process it later. Thier exhaled, believing the crisis was over. Back in the sedan, Lysandra opened her eyes and whispered softly to herself. Phase 1 complete. She opened her messages. A single text awaited her. Mr. Zephaniah, is it done? She replied with calm certainty. Lysandra, signed, access revoked. Prepare phase 2. While Thier celebrated with champagne dreams and empty credit cards, Lysandra was quietly setting the stage for a public collapse that would make his divorce look merciful. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the luxury apartment Thier had rented just weeks earlier. The space was modern, expensive, and carefully chosen to impress, especially Vesper. Yet as Thier sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his phone, the polished walls felt like they were closing in on him. None of his notifications made sense. No bank alerts, no confirmations, no explanations. Only silence. He refreshed his mobile banking app again. The screen loaded slowly, then displayed a short message that made his stomach tighten. Your account has been temporarily restricted. Please contact your branch. This is ridiculous, he muttered, tossing the phone onto the bed. Some stupid system glitch. From the bathroom, Vesper called out cheerfully, already planning the day. She had an itinerary ready, designer boutiques, a jewelry appointment, and a bridal fitting she'd booked without even asking. In her mind, the wedding had already happened. The lifestyle was already hers. Thayer forced a smile when she emerged. He told himself this was temporary. Banks made mistakes. He was still the CEO. People like him didn't lose access overnight. Their first stop was a high-end boutique in Buckhead, the kind where the doors were opened by staff trained to recognize wealth at a glance. Vesper moved through the store like royalty, selecting bags and shoes worth more than most people's annual salaries. "I'll take this one," she said repeatedly, barely glancing at price tags. The total climbed quickly. At the register, Thayer handed over a platinum card, confident this one would work. He even leaned casually against the counter, already imagining the approving looks from the staff. The terminal beeped. Declined. The clerk tried again. Declined. Thayer laughed too loudly. "Security protocols," he explained quickly. "High-value clients like me get flagged sometimes." Vesper's smile thinned. Not wanting to cause a scene, Thayer asked for the store's account details and promised a direct corporate transfer within hours. He flashed his CEO business card, assuring them the funds would arrive. After a brief, uncomfortable discussion, the manager reluctantly agreed. As they left the store, the weight on Thayer's chest grew heavier. Vesper wasn't satisfied. Next, she dragged him to a luxury car dealership. She wanted a new sport sedan as a wedding gift. Thayer agreed instantly. Buying a car felt safer. Financing went through banks and credit systems, not credit cards. Or so he thought. The showroom smelled of leather and ambition. The salesman was enthusiastic, praising Thayer's excellent taste. They test drove a deep red model that turned heads everywhere it went. For a moment, Thayer felt powerful again. That feeling vanished in the glass-walled office. The salesman's smile faded as he reviewed the credit report. He called his manager. They whispered while glancing sideways at Thayer. "What's the issue?" Thayer demanded sharply. The manager cleared his throat. "Sir, your application has been automatically rejected." "Rejected?" Thayer laughed in disbelief. "That's impossible." The manager lowered his voice. "Your name appears on an internal financial alert. Frozen assets, ownership disputes." The words hit harder than any slap. Vesper stared at him, confused and alarmed. Thayer stormed out, blaming faulty systems and incompetent staff, but inside, panic was taking root. In the car, he finally called his finance manager. The answer came quickly and quietly. "Sir, the access token you used was revoked this morning. The bank informed us of a change authorized by the majority shareholder." Thayer's hands went cold. "Majority shareholder," he repeated slowly. The silence on the other end was confirmation enough. Reality crashed in all at once. Back at corporate headquarters, Lysandra sat comfortably in her office, reviewing audit reports. Her assistant placed a green-colored envelope on her desk. An invitation. Dear and Vesper's wedding. 2 days away. Lysandra read it once, then picked up a pen and wrote a single word on the RSVP card. Attending. As Thayer scrambled to hold together a life built on borrowed power, Lysandra prepared to walk straight into his wedding, carrying the truth he never saw coming. The day of the wedding arrived like a ticking clock Thayer couldn't silence. From early morning, his phone wouldn't stop vibrating, not with congratulations. Vendor messages stacked one after another, each more urgent than the last. The florist wanted confirmation of payment. The catering company demanded the remaining balance. The boutique threatened to cancel delivery unless the transfer cleared immediately. Thayer stared at the screen, heart pounding. He replied with the same lie over and over. "Funds are processing. Bank delay. It'll be cleared today." Inside, fear gnawed at him. The hotel ballroom buzzed with activity. Staff hurried back and forth carrying towering arrangements of imported flowers. Crystal chandeliers were polished until they gleamed. A red carpet stretched toward the altar, immaculate and extravagant. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. Vesper was thrilled.
She floated through the chaos like a queen, barking orders with excitement. Those roses need to be darker. The lights over there, dim them slightly. I want drama. To her, this wasn't just a wedding. It was a declaration of victory. Thea, on the other hand, hid in one of the hotel's private rooms, pacing like a trapped animal. He tried calling his mother again. No answer. He sent messages. None replied. For the first time, doubt crept in. He remembered Lysandra's face in court, how calm she was. No tears, no bargaining, just quiet certainty. No, he told himself, she wouldn't dare. At a private estate across the city, Lysandra prepared in silence. A trusted family stylist worked carefully, applying understated makeup that highlighted strength rather than softness. Lysandra chose a long black silk dress, elegant, commanding, and deliberate. This wasn't mourning, it was authority. Mr. Zephaniah waited nearby, watching her with measured respect. "You don't have to go," he said gently. "We can let the law finish it." Lysandra met his eyes. "I need to see the end." As evening fell, guests began arriving at the hotel. Luxury cars lined the entrance, the ballroom filled with laughter, music, and champagne. Business partners mingled, socialites admired the decor. Cameras flashed. No one noticed the tension behind the groom's smile. At precisely 8 o'clock, the host took the stage. Applause echoed as Thea and Vesper stood beneath the lights. Vesper glowed, basking in attention. Thea straightened his tie, forcing confidence into his posture. The host announced the groom's speech. Thea stepped forward, gripping the microphone. He spoke about success, about ambition, about breaking free from limitations. He subtly mocked his past marriage, hinting that he'd been held back by someone who didn't understand greatness. Vesper smiled proudly. The guests applauded. Then, without warning, the lights flickered. Once. Twice. The grand chandelier gant. Music cut out mid-note. Murmurs spread through the crowd. Thea laughed nervously. "Just a technical issue," he said, tapping the microphone. It was dead. The ballroom fell into an eerie silence. Suddenly, the massive double doors at the back of the room began to open. Slowly. Cold air rushed in. 2 silhouettes appeared against the bright corridor light. The rhythmic sound of heels echoed across the marble floor. Lysandra stepped inside. Beside her walked Mr. Zephaniah. Whispers riffled through the crowd. Some recognized him instantly. Faces paled. Others stared at Lysandra, stunned. Thea's blood ran cold. Vesper snapped angrily. "Security! Who let her in?" No one moved. The guards didn't approach Lysandra. They escorted her. She walked calmly to the front, sat at the VVIP table, and crossed her legs gracefully. A waiter immediately served her water with deep respect. The room held its breath. Mr. Zephaniah stood. The spotlight snapped back on, focused solely on him. He raised a microphone. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding tonight." Thea staggered backward. As Mr. Zephaniah prepared to speak, Thea realized the wedding stage had been transformed into a courtroom, and the verdict was already written.
The ballroom remained frozen in stunned silence as Mr. Zephaniah stepped fully into the light. His presence alone carried weight, measured, authoritative, and unmistakably powerful. The guests who recognized him straightened in their seats, suddenly aware that this evening was no longer a celebration, but a reckoning. Mr. Zephaniah adjusted the microphone and spoke calmly, yet his voice echoed through every corner of the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I apologize for interrupting this event. However, a number of inaccurate statements were made moments ago, and I believe the truth deserves its moment." Thea felt his knees weaken. Vesper leaned toward him, whispering sharply, "Who is this man?" But Thea couldn't answer. His throat had gone dry. Mr. Zephaniah gestured toward the massive screen behind the altar. With a snap of his fingers, it flickered to life. Gone were the romantic photos meant to celebrate the couple. Instead, a detailed corporate structure filled the screen. At the top, in bold letters, stood a name that sent a collective shock through the audience. Lysandra Vandross, chairwoman and majority shareholder. A wave of murmurs swept across the room. Thea shook his head violently.
This is fake," he shouted, though his voice sounded hollow even to himself. Mr. Zephaniah continued unfazed. He traced the chart downward, calmly explaining how the holding company controlled multiple subsidiaries, including the one Thier claimed to have built from nothing. He stopped at a small box near the middle of the structure. Thier Jewin, Managing Director, Contractual Appointment. By contract, Mr. Zephaniah emphasized, repeating the phrase slowly. Gasps erupted among the guests. Vesper's face drained of color. She stared at the screen, then at Thier, searching for denial. "You said it was your company," she whispered. Thier rushed forward, waving his arms wildly. "I worked for everything. I brought in clients. I made deals. The house, the cars, they're mine." The screen changed again. Property records, vehicle registrations, asset ownership files. Every document bore the same name. Landros Family Trust, Lysandra Vantros. Not a single asset was registered to Thier. Mr. Zephaniah's voice sharpened. All luxury items provided to Mr. Thier were company facilities, granted solely due to marital status. That status ended this morning. Thier collapsed against the altar table, breathing hard. Vesper backed away from him, shaking her head. "You lied to me! You said you were the owner!" Before Thier could respond, Mr. Zephaniah opened a navy blue folder. The room went silent again. "This," he said, holding it up, "is the agreement Mr. Thier signed today." Thier's eyes widened in terror. Mr. Zephaniah read aloud, Clause 14, Paragraph 3. Upon voluntary renunciation of spousal status, any company losses, unauthorized expenses, and personal use of corporate funds shall be converted into personal debt, repayable within 24 hours. The words struck like thunder. Thier staggered forward. No, that's not possible." "It is," Mr. Zephaniah replied coldly. "A forensic audit completed last week revealed total losses of $7 million. The guests erupted in shocked whispers. "And," added calmly, "the $350,000 wedding expense charged today, unauthorized, brings the total to $7,350,000. Thier collapsed to his knees. At that moment, side doors opened. Police officers and legal representatives entered, walking straight toward the stage. The handcuffs glinted under the lights. Vesper screamed. Thier cried out, crawling toward Lysandra's table. "Please, Lysandra, help me! I made a mistake." Lysandra stood slowly. Her voice was steady. "For 5 years, I cleaned up your mistakes. Tonight, you face them." The police lifted Thier to his feet. The celebration was over. As the handcuffs closed and cameras flashed, Lysandra knew this wasn't the end, because one final reckoning still awaited outside the ballroom.
The click of metal cuffs echoed louder than the music ever had. Thier's screams cut through the ballroom as the police dragged him toward the side exit. His expensive suit was now wrinkled and stained, his dignity shattered in front of hundreds of witnesses. Just minutes earlier, he had stood on that same stage, boasting about freedom and success. Now his knees buckled with every step. "Lysandra!" he cried hoarsely, twisting his head back. "Please, just talk to me. I'll fix everything." She didn't move. Lysandra stood still, her posture straight, her expression unreadable. The woman he once dismissed as weak now looked untouchable, as if the chaos around her existed in another world entirely. When their eyes met, Thier expected anger, hatred, anything. He saw none. Only closure. Vesper's collapse came next. As the reality sank in, she lunged after Thier, sobbing hysterically. "This isn't my fault! I didn't know! I was lied to!" She tried to follow him, but the hotel manager stepped forward, blocking her path with practiced calm. "Miss Vesper," he said firmly, holding out a printed document, "your name appears on the reservation contract as secondary guarantor." Her breath hitched. "If the primary party cannot settle the bill, you are legally responsible. Until payment is addressed, you cannot leave." The figure printed at the bottom glared up at her.
$350,000. Vesper screamed. She tore off her engagement ring and threw it across the marble floor, where it skidded uselessly beneath the table. Guests stepped back instinctually, phones raised, recording every humiliating second. Outside the ballroom, sirens wailed. Thier was pushed into a patrol car, his face buried in his hands. The flash of cameras followed him even there, capturing the fall of a man who once believed himself untouchable. Back inside, the guests remained frozen, unsure whether to leave or stay. What had begun as a wedding had turned into a public execution of reputation. Mr. Zephaniah broke the silence. "Mr. and ladies and gentlemen," he said evenly, "thank you for your patience. The matter is now under legal control." His words signaled the end. One by one, guests began to stand. Some whispered in disbelief. Others avoided eye contact, ashamed of having applauded Thier's lies only moments earlier. Business partners quietly distanced themselves, already calculating how quickly they needed to erase their associations. Lysandra watched it all with calm detachment. She turned away from the stage and began to walk toward the exit. The crowd parted for her without a word. No one dared stop her. No one dared speak. Near the doorway, Vesper suddenly broke free from the staff restraining her and rushed forward, blocking Lysandra's path. "Please," she sobbed desperately. "As a woman, help me! I didn't know he was lying! I'll lose everything!" Lysandra looked at her carefully. She saw the ambition, the greed, the same hunger that had blinded Thier. Without a word, Lysandra reached into her clutch and pulled out a small white envelope. She handed it to Vesper calmly. Vesper's eyes lit up with hope. Her hands trembled as she tore it open. Inside was no check, only a printed invoice for the wedding dress Vesper was wearing, unpaid. Lysandra leaned in slightly and spoke in a low, steady voice. "You wanted his lifestyle. Congratulations. You have his debts." Vesper collapsed to the floor, screaming. Lysandra didn't look back. Outside, the night air felt cool and clean. Her black sedan waited patiently at the curb. Mr. Zephaniah opened the door for her. As the car pulled away, Lysandra glanced once at the glowing hotel behind her. The lights still shone brightly, but the illusion inside had completely burned down. She closed her eyes. For the first time in years, the weight on her chest was gone. But while the world watched Thier's downfall, a far quieter battle was unfolding, one that would decide who truly controlled the empire he thought he owned.
The news broke before sunrise. By the time Atlanta woke up, Thier's face was everywhere, splashed across news sites, trending on social media, dissected by business analysts and gossip bloggers alike. Headlines spoke of fraud, embezzlement, and the spectacular collapse of a so-called self-made executive. The wedding-turned-arrest was replayed from every angle, slowed down, zoomed in, and mercilessly analyzed. From a quiet breakfast room overlooking her family estate, Lysandra watched none of it. She sat at a long oak table, sunlight filtering softly through sheer curtains, sipping tea while reviewing documents on her tablet. The calm of the morning felt almost unreal compared to the chaos she knew was unfolding beyond those gates. Mr. Zephaniah entered quietly, carrying a slim folder. "They transferred him to Central Holding late last night," he said evenly. "Bail was denied." Lysandra nodded once. "And Vesper?" she asked. Mr. Zephaniah allowed himself a faint knowing breath. Her family arrived at the hotel after midnight. The bill was paid, reluctantly. They've issued a public statement distancing themselves from her involvement. Lysandra closed her eyes briefly, not in satisfaction, in acceptance. The fallout was moving exactly as expected. At corporate headquarters, emergency board meetings were already underway. Executives who once bowed to Thier now scrambled to prove loyalty to the true authority. Emails flooded Lysandra's inbox, some apologetic, others embarrassingly flattering. She ignored most of them. Instead, she focused on the forensic audit summaries in front of her.
Years of negligence, misused funds, vanity projects disguised as strategic initiatives. The numbers painted a clear picture of decay hidden beneath confidence and charm. Fear hadn't just betrayed her emotionally, he had endangered everything her family had built. By mid-morning, Lysandra arrived at headquarters for the first time as herself, not a shadow, not a silent partner, not the CEO's wife. The building seemed to recognize her authority instantly. Doors opened without hesitation, staff straightened their posture as she passed. In the executive wardroom, silence fell the moment she entered. Lysandra took her seat at the head of the table. "I won't waste your time," she said calmly. "Effective immediately, all operations will undergo restructuring. Transparency is no longer optional." No one objected. She appointed interim leadership, froze questionable projects, and authorized full cooperation with investigators. Each decision was precise, unemotional, and irreversible. For the first time in years, the company breathed honestly. Elsewhere, in a gray holding cell that smelled of disinfectant and regret, Fear sat alone. The arrogance that once defined him had evaporated. His designer suit had been replaced with something coarse and unfamiliar. Every sound echoed too loudly. He replayed the moment Lysandra had turned away from him, over and over. Only now did he understand. He hadn't lost his wife at the courthouse. He had lost everything long before that, when he mistook access for ownership and silence for weakness. Back at the estate, Lysandra stood on the balcony as dusk settled in. The city lights flickered on in the distance, indifferent to the rise and fall of human pride. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, feeling neither triumph nor sorrow, only freedom. Her phone vibrated softly. A message from Mr. Zephaniah. Phase 3 is ready. Final approvals needed. Lysandra looked out over the darkening horizon. "Proceed," she typed. She knew what came next wouldn't be loud, it wouldn't trend, there would be no cameras or dramatic speeches, but it would be permanent. As Thier faced the consequences of his past, Lysandra prepared her final move, one that would ensure he could never rise again, no matter how hard he tried.
The documents arrived just after dawn, delivered in thick, sealed folders that carried no logos and no unnecessary markings. Lysandra reviewed them alone in her study, the room quiet, except for the faint ticking of an antique clock on the wall. Each page represented a decision already made. What remained was execution. Phase 3 was not about punishment. It was about permanence. Across the city, Thier's name was being stripped from everything he once flaunted. His corporate email was deactivated, his digital signatures revoked, internal directories updated as if he had never existed beyond a brief, regrettable chapter. At headquarters, IT teams worked through the night under direct authorization. Passwords were reset, access keys reassigned, entire systems restructured to prevent a single trace of his influence from lingering. By mid-morning, Lysandra arrived again, this time not to observe, but to conclude. The legal counsel presented the final report. All contracts signed by Mr. Thier under misrepresentation are now void. Vendor relationships have been revalidated under the parent trust. And his shares, Lysandra asked. The lawyer didn't hesitate. He never held any. Exactly as she knew. In the detention facility, Thier was finally allowed a phone call. His hands shook as he dialed the only number he believed might still answer, his former mentor, a man who once admired his ambition. The line went dead after one ring. He tried another contact, then another. No one answered. When the guard informed him his time was up, Thier felt something break inside. Not anger, not fear. Erasure. Back at the estate, Lysandra signed the last authorization with a steady hand. The Vandross Trust would fully absorb the remaining subsidiaries, dissolving the public-facing structure Thier had used as his stage. The brand would continue, but without him, without his name, his narrative, his manufactured legend. Quietly, efficiently, he was being edited out of history. News outlets struggled to keep up. Articles shifted from scandal to analysis.
Commentators debated how such a powerful executive had fallen so quickly, how ownership structures had been misunderstood for years. Lysandra never corrected them, let them speculate. In the afternoon, she met with the board privately. "We move forward," she said simply. "No interviews, no statements beyond what is legally required." One board member hesitated. "And Mr. Thier?" Lysandra's answer was calm. "He is no longer relevant." That evening, she returned to the balcony where the city glowed softly under the night sky. The wind carried distant traffic sounds, life continuing, indifferent and steady. Her phone buzzed again. "Mr. Zephaniah, all global accounts finalized. No residual access remains." Lysandra exhaled slowly. Years ago, she had loved a man she believed was building something alongside her. Now she stood alone, not abandoned, but unburdened. Inside a concrete cell, Thier stared at the wall as a guard passed by, reading aloud a headline from his phone. "Former CEO officially removed from all corporate records." Thier closed his eyes. Even his downfall had been taken from him. With the past erased and the present secured, Lysandra turned her attention to the future, unaware that one final confrontation was still waiting in the shadows.
The request came quietly, tucked between routine legal updates and audit confirmations. Inmate request for visitation. Thier. Lysandra stared at the message longer than she expected to. She had anticipated anger, appeals through lawyers, even threats once desperation set in. But a direct request from him felt different, smaller, stripped of entitlement. Mr. Zephaniah watched her carefully. "You are not obligated," he reminded her. "There is nothing left to discuss." "I know," Lysandra replied. Yet that night, sleep avoided her, not because she missed Thier, but because unfinished stories have a way of lingering. She had dismantled his world piece by piece, but she had never heard him speak without power backing his words. 3 days later, she arrived at the detention facility. The place was sterile and colorless, designed to erase individuality. Guards escorted her through a series of locked doors until she reached a small visitation room divided by reinforced glass. A metal chair waited on her side. She sat. Minutes passed. Then Thier was brought in. He looked smaller than she remembered, his shoulders slumped, his face pale and unshaven. The confidence that once filled every room he entered was gone, replaced by something fragile and unfamiliar. Regret. He sat down slowly, eyes lifting only after a long pause. "I didn't think you'd come," he said hoarsely through the phone receiver. "Neither did I, honestly." Silence stretched between them, heavy but not hostile. "I was wrong," Thier finally said. "About everything." Lysandra studied him carefully. For years she had imagined this moment, an apology, a realization, perhaps even remorse. Now that it was here, it felt late. "You didn't misunderstand," she said calmly. "You chose." Thier swallowed hard. "I thought you'd stop me. I thought if I pushed far enough, you'd fight back. Instead, you stepped aside." "I didn't step aside," Lysandra corrected. "I stepped forward." His eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know who I was without the company, without the money." "That was the problem," she replied gently. "Neither did I, until I removed you from it." Thier leaned closer to the glass, desperation creeping into his voice. "Help me. Just say something on my behalf. I don't need the company. I just want a chance to start again." Lysandra shook her head slowly. "You had chances, hundreds of them. You spent them like they were unlimited." The words landed harder than any accusation. She stood. "This is the last time we speak, not because I hate you, but because I don't need to carry you anymore." Thier pressed his hand against the glass. "Was any of it real?" Lysandra paused. "Yes," she said quietly. "That's why it hurt, and that's why it's over." She hung up the receiver and walked away without looking back. Outside, the sky was clear. Back at headquarters, life moved on. The restructured company stabilized quickly.
New leadership emerged. Employees worked without fear. The culture shifted from spectacle to substance. Lysandra watched it all from a distance, no longer needing to control every detail. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future not defined by repair, but by creation. That evening, she received a call from an international foundation requesting a private meeting. They wanted her involvement, her vision, her leadership, not as someone's wife, not as a shadow, but as herself. Lysandra smiled softly as she ended the call. Thyr's chapter was closed. Hers was just beginning. But just as Lysandra stepped fully into her new life, an unexpected revelation surfaced, one that threatened to challenge everything she believed was finally settled.
The invitation arrived on heavyweight paper, embossed with a symbol Lysandra hadn't seen in years. It wasn't from a corporation, a court, or a media outlet, but from a private international foundation known for operating far beyond public influence. The message was brief. A confidential matter requires your attention, discretion assured. Lysandra read it twice. By now, she trusted patterns more than promises. Power rarely knocked without reason. 2 days later, she stepped into a private conference suite overlooking a quiet stretch of coastline. The room was minimalist, designed to strip away distraction. 3 individuals waited inside, 2 men and 1 woman, all composed, all observant. They rose when she entered. "You've done something remarkable," the woman began, "not by destroying a man, but by dismantling a system that allowed him to exist." Lysandra didn't respond. She listened. They explained who they were: trustees overseeing legacy capital, generational assets, and strategic interventions. They had followed the Vandross Trust for years. Thyr's collapse hadn't shocked them. Lysandra's restraint had. "You chose silence over spectacle," one of the men said. "That's rare." Then came the reason for the meeting. The foundation had uncovered irregular movements tied to Thyr's tenure, accounts that predated even his rise, buried deep within shell structures no public audit had touched. Money had moved through channels designed not just to steal, but to hide something larger. "What kind of something?" Lysandra asked. The woman slid a folder across the table. Inside were names, not random ones: political donors, foreign intermediaries, non-profit fronts, patterns that suggested influence, not profit. "This isn't just fraud," the woman said quietly. "It's leverage." Lysandra felt a chill. Thyr had always chased status, but this was deeper, more dangerous. "Why show me this now?" Lysandra asked. "Because," the man replied, "your restructuring triggered dormant safeguards. These networks assumed he was still in control. They're exposed." Lysandra closed the folder slowly. "What do you want from me?" The woman met her gaze. "Nothing you don't already intend, to protect what's yours." They offered resources, intelligence, quiet protection if she needed it. Not an alliance, but an acknowledgement. As Lysandra left the suite, she felt the weight of the victory shift. The past wasn't clawing back, it was revealing itself. That night, Mr. Zephaniah joined her for dinner. She told him everything. He listened carefully, then said, "Then the final chapter isn't about him anymore." "No," Lysandra agreed. "It's about what he connected us to." Across the city, in a cell that felt colder than before, Thyr received a visit of his own. Not from a lawyer, not from family. A man in a gray suit sat across from him without introducing himself. "You were useful, but you've become unpredictable." Thyr's breath hitched. "I didn't talk, I swear." "We know, that's why you're still breathing." The man stood. "But your ex-wife?" he added thoughtfully. "She's far more interesting." Thyr realized then that losing everything had not freed him, it had exposed him. As unseen forces began to shift, Lysandra stood unknowingly at the center of a far greater game, one where victory would require more than control and survival would demand absolute clarity. The first sign came as silence. Not the peaceful kind Lysandra had grown accustomed to, but the deliberate absence of noise. The kind that suggested systems pausing, people watching, and decisions being weighed somewhere out of sight. No threatening messages, no sudden audits, just a subtle tightening around her world. Mr. Zephaniah noticed it too. 3 routine approvals were delayed today, he said during their morning briefing. No explanation. Different departments, same timing. Lysandra nodded slowly. They're measuring distance. From the moment the Foundation revealed the hidden networks, Lysandra had been careful. She authorized no new disclosures, avoided public appearances, and shifted sensitive operations offline. Control, she knew, wasn't about visibility. It was about restraint. Still, restraint didn't guarantee safety. A week later, a discreet envelope arrived at the estate. No return address, no courier signature. Inside was a single photograph. Lysandra stepping into her car. The date stamp was from that very morning. She stared at it without flinching. "They want me to react," she said calmly. Mr. Zephaniah's jaw tightened. "We can increase security. Go dark." "No," Lysandra replied. "That's still movement. They want movement." Instead, she made a call to the Foundation. Within hours, a secure line was established. Voices spoke carefully, avoiding names and places. They confirmed what Lysandra already suspected. The networks Thyr had brushed against were fracturing. Some wanted silence, others wanted control. "And you?" Lysandra asked. "We want containment," the woman replied. "No chaos, no martyrs." Lysandra considered that. "Then we want the same thing." That night, she drafted a single document, short, precise, and final. It outlined a transfer of select intelligence to a neutral oversight body, just enough to force accountability without triggering retaliation. She signed it. At dawn, the transfer was executed. Across the city, phones rang, meetings were canceled, channels went quiet. The message was clear: escalation would cost everyone. In the detention facility, Fear felt the shift before he understood it. Guards grew distant, visits stopped. The man in the gray suit did not return. For the first time since his arrest, no one needed him. He lay awake, realizing the cruelest truth. He had never been central to anything. He had been a door, bravely useful, now sealed. Back at the estate, Lysandra walked the gardens as sunlight filtered through the trees. The photograph burned quietly in her pocket, a reminder rather than a threat. Power, she had learned, wasn't domination. It was knowing where the lines were and refusing to cross them. Her phone buzzed once. Foundation. Containment achieved. No further action required. Lysandra exhaled slowly. The storm had passed, not with thunder, but with understanding. Yet, as she turned back toward the house, a final file appeared on her secure tablet. One last unresolved matter. Fear's sentencing date. She closed the screen. Some endings, she knew, had to be witnessed. With the shadows receding and the lines redrawn, only one chapter remained, where justice, not power, would decide how the story truly ends. The courtroom was quieter than Lysandra expected. No reporters crowded the doors, no flashes of cameras, just polished wood, muted light, and the low murmur of procedural order. Justice, she realized, rarely arrived with drama. It arrived with structure. She took her seat near the back, unnoticed by most. That was intentional. This day wasn't about her authority, her wealth, or her restraint. It was about consequence. Thyr was brought in moments later. He looked older, thinner, worn down by weeks of uncertainty. The defiance that once animated his posture was gone, replaced by a careful stillness. When he spotted Lysandra in the gallery, his eyes widened briefly, then softened into something like acceptance. He didn't wave, he didn't beg. That alone told her everything. The charges were read slowly: financial misconduct, breach of fiduciary duty, fraudulent representation. Each count landed like a measured blow, not meant to wound, but to define reality.
Thier's attorney argued mitigation, stress, misjudgment, influence, the usual language of someone trying to reshape accountability into misfortune. The judge listened, then spoke. The evidence shows not a single error, the judge said evenly, but a pattern, not ignorance, but entitlement. Thier lowered his head. The sentence followed. It wasn't theatrical, it wasn't cruel. It was final. Years, not months. Restitution, not symbolic fines. Permanent removal from executive leadership without appeal. A quiet gasp moved through the room. The gavel struck once. Done. As guards escorted Thier away, he turned his head just enough to look at Lysandra. There was no accusation in his eyes, no anger, only a tired understanding of what had been lost and what could never be recovered. She met his gaze calmly, not to forgive, not to punish, but to acknowledge the truth. Outside, the courthouse steps were bathed in late afternoon light. Lysandra paused there for a moment, breathing in the open air. She felt no triumph, no emptiness either, only balance. Mr. Zephaniah joined her. "It's finished," he said. "Yes," Lysandra replied, "it is." In the weeks that followed, life settled into something new. The company thrived under transparent leadership. The foundation partnership evolved into long-term reform initiatives. Lysandra redirected capital toward education, accountability, and quiet systems that prevented the kind of collapse she had survived. She didn't give interviews. She didn't publish memoirs. Her power no longer required explanation. One evening, standing once more on the balcony overlooking the city, Lysandra reflected on the woman she had been, patient, silent, underestimated. That version of herself wasn't weak. She had been waiting. Her phone chimed with a final message from the foundation. All matters resolved, no outstanding risk. Lysandra smiled faintly and set the phone aside. The city lights flickered on, steady and indifferent. Somewhere behind those lights, Thier would begin a life stripped of illusion. Somewhere ahead of them, Lysandra would begin one defined entirely by choice. She turned back inside, closing the door softly behind her, not as an ending, but as a beginning. Because power doesn't always announce itself, and the most dangerous transformations are the ones the world never sees coming. If today's story touched your heart or kept you hooked, you can show your love by sending a super thanks. Your support helps me continue creating more powerful life stories for you. Thank you truly for always being so kind and supportive. I can't wait to read your thoughts about this story. On your screen right now, you'll find 2 new stories that I highly recommend, filled with emotions, twists, and lessons. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe for many more inspiring life stories. Until the next one, sending you love, respect, and gratitude. See you in the next story.